Good morning and a warm welcome to Sunrise. I'm Joke Rogers.
It's a cool Saturday morning here, depending on what side of the divide you find yourself.
Yeah, it started out cool, but the sun is coming out, so...
Yes.
In another an hour...
It's not called sunrise for nothing. The sun has to rise.
Yeah,
It's
certainly.
not called sunrise. This is not Iceland, and it's not the North Pole. Yes, this is Africa. Nigeria, to be precise. Lagos.
Yeah.
At the border between Lagos and Ogun State, just to be a bit more, more precise.
More precise.
Yes. So, I guess we can easily say that the high point of the week was the president's visit to the UK.
Yes, certainly. And I'm sure it was a very interesting one. Fruitful one, I mean, by most indications, all the deals signed and, the things done. He missed some lunches, because of the fasting, but hey, I'm sure dinner was good.
Well, clearly. And I think for one thing that this was able to tell me is that for once, all of us kind of put our differences aside on this.
Yeah.
At least a sizable number of people kind of put their differences aside,
and applauded the
initiative, the gesture of the kingdom of the United Kingdom on the visit. And then you also see from the camaraderie between the two heads of government that Prince Charles was quite fond of the president.
Yeah, yeah.
Holding hands in public.
Yes,
and not just once.
Yeah, he would occasionally touch on the elbow. I actually, noticed those things. The touch on the elbow to say, oh, let's go ahead, There was a time he walked behind him.
Yeah.
It's not traditional for monarchs to be the ones behind.
Yeah.
Everyone else walks behind them.
Yes.
They are the ones in front. But he walked, so it was an honor for him to have done that. And I thought, at once I said, oh, see these two old men, guiding each other. It was really fun to watch, and I enjoyed it.
And one of the things that I also say in leadership is your most important tool in leadership is your relationships. At least one of the most important is your relationships. And if I learned recently, Joke, that the one major way that leaders lead is through communication. What you say, how you say it, what you do, how you do it, and all of that. And it's clear from the camaraderie between the two gentlemen that they have a relationship.
Yeah.
And that relationship, it's easy to see
that
if the United Kingdom can hold the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in such high esteem, everyone else is only sensible that everyone else will align.
Yeah. And then that this is the first in almost 4 decades.
Yeah.
Which says something. And on the sidelines of the visit, we're talking to people like Sheyi Law and the director of the UK Met, the Metropolitan Police, and they were saying that a lot of work went into the preparation for this state visit. In the background, it took months and months and months of planning. I don't know, if not years, I don't know, as of when it was agreed that, he would go, or when the invitation was sent. But, it took a while, a month's planning to actually ensure that it was a success. And I quite thoroughly thought
and
it was.
Another thing that is very interesting on this visit, Joke, is that generally it is kind of customary that when Nigeria's presidents go abroad, there will be some other noises, if I can use the term,
the protests. I understand. Yes.
We didn't hear much of that. Not that it didn't happen, but we didn't really hear much of that. And secondly, to the preparations that you were talking about, I find it interesting that hours in the leading to the dinner at the Windsor Castle, the king was part of the people making the preparation before the president came. There's, what, 4 years between them? And the older was kind of serving the younger, in a manner of speaking. It's really touching.
Yeah.
The kind of dexterity, and well, you lived in the UK, so you know how much work, thinking goes into what British people do.
Yes, and you know that even at that, you know, they have the protocol people that are working for the event to be successful. The amount of work that are going to, you know, it was full military parade. It got full, you know, all the work and the rehearsals and the practice that goes into that, you know, receiving them, you know, the car that fetched them from the airport and all the beautiful, you know, it was just everything prim and proper, well arranged. And then, you know, I think the king poured his heart into it. And then, you know, at the banquet where he was talking about jollof rice and he alluded to, you know, Nigeria's jollof rice being the best, I said, oh, you know, don't let Ghana catch you saying that. You know, but, you know, it was really a good thing. He too, I think, is a man that pours his heart into relationships, you know, outside from the one that he has, you know, with the president, but with communities. I think he was able to put himself into a relationship he has. That's why he was able to talk from the heart about the people that he has met, their culture that he has learnt about, and all that. So I'm guessing it was a good thing. And you know that sometimes, you know, before he was crowned as the King of England. You know, part of what they do is they go around Commonwealth countries, you know, in Africa, India, what have you. So they learn about the people. So I think even when he became king, it even became more important for him to be able to do that, so that colonial territory is now, you know, a relationship between countries. And hey, you know,
very, very interesting. I also find it interesting that the king held a kind of a pre-visit kind of camaraderie with the Nigerian delegation. Then with Nigerians living in the UK, I find that also very, 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 very. So, King Charles III, thank you for hosting us.
And then our First Lady also preached at Lambeth. That's good. Okay.
And we have to give it to the Queen as well, because it is the Women's Month, so let's not let's not cause kata kata. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so what are we talking about this morning? Nigeria in the Global Terrorism Index.
Well, it's definitely something we can't just get away from. And the next conversation will be Ramadan is over, and what next? We'll find out more about that in the course of time.
And the focus on forests and economies, that's also coming up in the course of the program.
We'll talk about the Asaba of Asaba in conversation with corporate Nigeria. And
of course, lastly, building a family culture that comes up in our lifestyle segment.
Someone wonder what's family culture. Don't worry, relax. We'll find out about that. So we'll join you. You will join us when we return. In the meantime, it's gonna be a wonderful time with us. So please grab your cup of cocoa. I had mine already.
All right.
Or it's cocoa or whatever it is.
Water.
And I understand water
tea or
is also
coffee.
healthy. Yes, but please
grab something.
No alcohol this morning. Thank you.
Early.
We'll be right back.
So welcome as we get right into it. And unfortunately, our topic first discussion is the same old issue that, you know, I hope we'll ever stop talking about this. The Global Terrorism Index. And, you know, Nigeria's place on it. You're deep in thought.
Yeah, because, I mean, this came almost like, I don't know whether to call it a coincidence. at a time when there's a resurgence
Yes.
of these dark, ghastly, fatal attacks. It also came at a time when U.S. A detachment of U.S. forces are in Nigeria, though not in combat, not for combat, but for some support to the Nigerian military and everything. It's sad, and guess what? It's also happening in largely Muslim states during Ramadan.
Yeah,
and those are not nice lines to
and for the 2026 Global Terrorism Index, Nigeria is ranked as the 4th most affected country, by terrorism globally, and this marks a decline in security from the 2025 report of the index, where Nigeria ranked 6th, not too far away, but 6th all the same. Nigeria was the only country in the Sahel region to experience an increase in both incidents and fatalities in this reporting period, even though we know that there are crises in other countries, in the Sahel region. But hey.
Well, anyway, let's get into it, because I'm curious, and I'm sure a good number of Nigerians are also interested in what this whole thing is about.
Yeah, so we have Professor Ademola Abbas, Director of Administration, the Progressive Institute's Professor of International Law, Global Affairs Analyst. He joins us from our Abuja studios. Welcome to the program. And
thank you very much for having me.
And we have in the studio with us Colonel Yomi Dari, MD, CEO, International Master Security Systems Limited. That's Colonel Yomi Dari, retired. He's not in active service. Wow. But thank you for joining us on the program. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let me begin with you, Colonel. I'm sorry, Jockey, I knew you'd want it. Those lines we drew, right? This issue, this index report coming up at a time when there is a sudden, I'd call it, resurgence of insecurity, of attacks, with, and more so in Maiduguri. Also at a time when, in fact, a month ago, I saw a report that says that the New York Times reported that the U.S. detachment went from the U.S. to Maiduguri. These attacks happening in Maiduguri as well. So one wonders, do you draw any lines?
Well, Ayo, that Nigeria is ranked 4th in Global Terrorism Index is not just a ranking. It is a very painful reality, because behind every crisis that we have witnessed or we are witnessing, it's behind these numbers we have families, we have Nigerians, a father, mother, or child that has been taken by this, a crisis that has lasted far too long. We must be honest with ourselves. What we are facing is beyond the guns.
So what really is happening? We've heard military officers say that there is kinetic, there is non-kinetic, and these issues are happening, and it will seem like they are intractable, and we don't seem to be able to control them or contain them. We have state governments in power who get security votes. We have soldiers all over the country. We have DSS, who is in every local government in the country, and these things still sort of, in my opinion, sort of catch us unawares. And we're talking about what you're talking about, they're not just numbers, they're destinies. So did we at some point drop the ball? What exactly could be happening?
Well, let me tell you, as it is, the military, they are winning strategically. Strategically. But truth be told, the military is also kind of overwhelmed. We have them deployed in the northeast, the north central. We have them deployed in the south. And what is needed right now is intelligence.
Don't we have intelligence?
We don't have enough intelligence. When I say intelligence, intelligence is not limited to the military alone. Because what we are facing now is an asymmetric warfare. It's not a conventional warfare. The military is meant for conventional warfare. But this is more than a conventional warfare. And you'll discover that these terrorists, every day, they are more emboldened. They are also strategizing. And they take advantage of where governance is weak.
Okay, let's...
and there are critical gaps.
Yes. Let me ask
gaps.
you, thank you, Colonel. Let me ask you, Prof, what do you make of these, particularly those lines? If you think there are connections with all these, the lines, the Global Terrorism Index is coming out at a time when these attacks suddenly resurged, and dare I say also, the fact that the U.S. trainers, if I can use the term that the Minister of in charge of security used, of defense, Minister of Defense used. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, thank you very much, Ayo. Nice to see you again, and to your colleague, Joke. I think I'll probably be meeting her for the first time. Well, look, let's first try to put all this in perspective. When you talk about the GTI coming out coincidentally with when the U.S. is active in Nigeria and there's upsurge and this and that, first let's take a step back and remember that the result of 2026 relates to the event of 2025. U.S. only came in about 4 or 5 months ago, about towards the end. Actually, they'd already closed the reporting by then. So whatever activities are going on now from the U.S. and other actors in Nigeria are going to figure in 2027. Which will be on 2026 activities, basically. So let's sort of clarify that. That does not mean then that, however, we haven't had a serious issue on our hand. Nigeria being the 4th most impacted country globally on the terrorism index. But again, you know, before we get gun-ho with ourselves, let's remember that this is not the first time Nigeria has been on number 4. If you go back to 2012, between 2012 and 2020, Nigeria actually had some of its worst ranking. It dropped to number 2 at a point in time, was number 3 at a point in time. Go to 2015 and 2016. Nigeria was number 2, number 3. We didn't have so much hue and cry. What I'm trying to say is that, yes, it's tragic. The fact that we have not been able to contain and to deal effectively with terrorism in Nigeria. But then, Nigeria is not a country that is living all by itself. We're not an island on our own. If activities going on within the, as an example, apart from the domestic outlets of Nigeria, within the sub-regional grouping, within the continental area, even within the global aspect, have direct impact on Nigeria itself. So there is no way we can begin to focus on issue of just, we've been going about the question of the military not having intelligence enough. There is no proper coordination of intelligence and this and that. I think this sometimes seems to me, permit me to say, a rather simplistic way of looking at this thing. We have to be more holistic in the way we approach this issue. We have to be able to ask ourselves serious questions that what actually drives terrorism? Why is there an uptake? Let me give you an example. In 2011, Nigeria was number 8. Between 2011 and 2026, we've got about roughly 15 years or 14 years. Nigeria has oscillated between the 8th worst country in terms of the impact to 4th. So we have moved between 8 and 4th. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but we have oscillated between 8 and 4. Look at a country like Burkina Faso, was 145 in 2011, suddenly becoming, number 2, thereabout today. So you have the shifting. Look at Pakistan too. You have a lot of shifting. So there are so many dynamics that we have to contemplate when we are talking about it. That does not mean that we should be, we are okay with being ranked even number 4 or number 10. Again, you have to understand what comes into the global ranking itself. Today, the fact that, as an example, if you look at the whole thing, let's even acknowledge one fact, that this is the first time, this is the one occasion that terrorism has dropped significantly. That is 28% from the last year. You're talking about from 732,000 deaths to 5,582 today, death basically. So in other words, there is a decline generally. Guess what? The region in the world, the continent that has witnessed the most increase actually is in the West. The West has witnessed, globally we have 19 deterioration, so to say, in terms of global index, in terms of countries that have deteriorated. 7 of those 19 are from the Western world. You're talking about the US, you talk about the Australia and so many other countries. It's not even in Africa here. Of course, in terms of single countries, Africa was, as an example, 5 countries that are worse today. That is, all of them are in Africa. We talk about Nigeria, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. The only non-African group among those 5 most impacted is Pakistan, basically, which is currently number 1 globally. So what I'm saying is that there are so many dynamics we have to look at before we get too gung-ho, too hyped about being ranked number 4 and being ranked number 10. For me, it's not just a question of being ranked number 4, being ranked number 10. We've got to look at the whole panoply of activities, dynamics that continue to make our effort, or to minimize our effort, or to make our effort not to be substantial, not to be gaining the kind of gains, the kind of traction that we want to have in Nigeria. And I think that discussion must go beyond just what you're talking about, the kinetic, force and this and that the military is. No, we have to go much way beyond that.
Thank you. And now, Colonel, going beyond that, we have another guest in Abuja. We'll get to him in just a moment, but let me just ask you this before we go there. We were talking about spillovers, we're talking about, the Sahel region, other countries, the neighboring countries that are also, suffering this insurgency. They too have their issues, their crises, and we see some of those. There was a point we understood that some of these attacks were from foreign attackers, not Nigerian of people in Nigeria. So how much is Nigeria impacted, by these spillovers from the neighboring countries that also have their own share of the crisis?
Well, thank you very much, Joke. First, you must realize the porosity of our borders. When we're talking about the Niger Republic, Chad, and even Cameroon. So the borders are very porous. And we are part of the Sahel region. So it's so easy, even when the military comes in and hits them, it's so easy for them, after suffering some setback, to regroup. So they regroup from across the border with the ISWAP. So initially we had the Boko Haram, but even at that, if you trace the history of the Boko Haram too, they came in from across the border. Okay, now with the ISWAP, so it's something that is very troubling. It is very troubling because you cannot have the military everywhere. Once the military comes in and hits them, like I said, they go back and then regroup. And then again, this area is so porous, and we have the issues of the Alimanjaris, the poverty in the northern part of Nigeria. So they feed off this poverty, and of course we have the idle youth too, unemployment. So these are the things that help, to kind of encourage this group. And then I also like to say that what we have to work on, in my opinion, is intelligence, because modern counter-terrorism feeds on intelligence.
I'm a little iffy about that, because, as I said earlier, there is no local government, substantive local government in the country that doesn't have a DSS official. And so if we say there's a failure of intelligence, we are questioning everything that we represent. Here's what I mean. Every local government system, I have worked with a local government, administration before in Lagos. And even though things weren't that bad in Lagos, every month, I think, at least quarterly, they have meetings, security meetings at the local government level. The DPO, the Community Development Associations. Let me ask Dr. Hussaini Abdul, Country Director, CARE Nigeria, which is part of CARE International, also joins us from Abuja studio. Thank you for joining us this morning. Well, I don't know if you caught the part where Professor Abbas, right beside you there, is also raised issues about whether or not intelligence is a problem. Justice Colonel Yominda retired is telling us here that we have an intelligence gap, and which is one of the reasons that these things kind of catch us unawares. I'm not sure if the governors and all will agree with him, because they get security briefs. The local government administrations, they hold security meetings. I know that they hold security meetings because I have kind of worked among one of them before. What are your thoughts on this? Because even though we are talking about the Global Terrorism Index, these things pile up, as we heard Prof say the other time, that it's whatever happens in 2026 that is going to form the GTI for Nigeria in the year 2027.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me. And actually, global indexing have its limitations, because the indexing is about providing the common framework to explain dynamics across different locations and different contexts. And in most cases, contextual issues get mixed up, and therefore you profile, you categorize, and you number or you grade without taking into a deeper understanding of context. Take, for instance, when you compare the contextual formation of the Central Sahel, where we belong, and you compare that with Southeast Asia or with the Western world, and therefore decide to define the level of terrorism, it can be very problematic, and some of us have been raising that quite a lot. Yes, sometimes it's good for accountability. It raises alarm. It tells you are not doing well. But it doesn't do beyond that, because it is practically not explaining anything. And one of my problems with the conversation in Nigeria, look, the level of terror, mindless killing, displacement is unbelievably high in the country. No doubt about it. And nobody will try to wish that away in a very simplistic manner. But I think what I have found with this country is that we sometimes over-sensationalize social crisis. And what we are dealing with is not simple violence of terrorism. As terrible as it is, we are actually dealing with a major social crisis. And so what we have seen in our conversations, we've reduced this huge social crisis to issues of security. And so when we just come at all time, we are talking about security, or whether security has collapsed here, or insecurity there, or insecurity. So when you speak that way, you define this big crisis as just a problem of insecurity, and you miss it. And that's what brings the conversation of intelligence or no intelligence into the conversations. Look, Nigeria has, the security structure of this country permeates everywhere. But experiences within the country also differs. You did mention about DSS in some local government. How many of them do you actually have? When you go into a local government or a community with deep level of this kind of crisis that we're talking about. The crisis we're dealing with, they are different, they are multi-dimensional expressions of this crisis. It is not always about the Boko Haram in the northeast. It's not always about the bandits in the northwest or the violence conflict we're experiencing in the north central. There are differential expressions of this, and I'm very happy Prof did mention this earlier, that what we are seeing is not a reflection of what is happening now or this year, and there is a reflection of what happened last year. And therefore, the indexing, we have to aggregate data over a period of time for 1 year. And so what we are going to be seeing for this year will be reflected in the next year, report. Yeah, but it's still not acceptable for us as a country to be dealing with these issues intractably for over 15 years, and then we are not improving, but what we are actually seeing is an escalation. So when you are experiencing escalation, you need to understand the social structure that is creating this escalation. But what we have often missed is we interpret this as some episodic things. So we go for some of the major incidences. One big incident happened in Niger or in Kwara, and the whole country is outraged about it, and then it is over, and the next one happened, and then we are outraged about it, and then we are not looking at why is it happening? What are the structural drivers of this thing that is actually happening? And we talk about more arms, more soldiers. We are talking about more forest guard. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it is wrong. We have to stop the killing. But we can actually not stop the killing as long as the underlying condition that favors, that supports that is actually going on. So when we over-securitize conversation, what we get is a security response. And that's why discussion will be bordering around intelligence. That's why we'll be talking more around
my
whether we
apologies,
have soldiers
Dr. Abdul.
or not.
Are these things coming to us as a surprise? We have been talking about this for a very, very, very long time. Dare I go back, Dr. Abdul, as far back as the Metatsini days, where we hear these things and we wonder, this is supposed to be a no-brainer. This issue of, poverty and all of that in the northern parts of the country is not something that is coming at us very, very new. However, at the same time, Dr. Abdul, you would remember that there are certain things, certain trades, that when we talk about these trades, these products in the Federal Republic of Nigeria, they all come from the north. Kano is known for one thing. Kaduna is known for another. Benue is known for yams, and on and on like that. In fact, I'm sure you're aware, Dr. Abdul, that the so-called made in whatever part of Europe leather, they come from Kano, a good number of them. So we can't say that, it's because of poverty. What exactly is wrong? It's not that these assets are not there within our enclave in this country. So what is lost? What is missing? What are the gaps that need to be filled?
Yeah, thank you for going into history and actually telling us about the Metatsine incidents. And look, you need to understand properly the structure of this economy of this country. And when we are talking about structural driver, it's not always about poverty. As important as poverty is, and there are different expressions of it. What about the state itself? What has happened to the state? So when we are looking at it, we are seeing strong institutional collapse. The level of disorder that has permeated this country, that allowed for historical processes of impunity, that people can do things and still get away with it. So there are two dimensions of this structural failure. There is a dimension that actually has to do with the society in terms of the collapse of the communal fabric, what holds people together, that social glue, those things that will make you think twice before you commit any crime, how those structures have collapsed within our society. And then how the state itself has become institutionally weakened, lacking the capacity to act. And when I talk about acting here, I'm not referring to taking military action or violence, state violence to suppress other forms of violence. I'm actually talking about the state being able to even understand the issues and being able to act in the right manner and deal with those issues the way they are supposed to be dealt with. That it is not looking at things in a very simplistic, narrow perspective of saying we are dealing with security problem, let's solve the security problem. There are different dimensions of security. So you can't talk about physical security when you have not dealt fundamentally with the human security dimensions of these issues. So it's a complex web of issue, and it requires a proper disaggregation to understand and to deal with it. But what we have in this country is a one-size-fits-all approach to virtually everything. What is happening in Benue, what is happening in Kwara, what is happening in Katsina, in Zamfara, in Borno is one thing. And therefore, we take the same action and we deal with them in the same manner. So look, if you take Metasina, and I know that really well because I lived in it. And the truth about it is that it's defined within the context of urbanization and urban poverty. It wasn't the kind of situation that we are dealing with. You can refer to it as a precursor of what we are dealing with, maybe an early expressions of what we are dealing with. But it was completely different. It was contextually different. There were no small arms at that time. There were no mobile communication. There was no mobile banking. There were no televisions. It was a limited context. What is happening in the Northeast is completely different from what's happening in the Northwest. And the dynamics are the expression, the drivers are completely different. Each part of this country experienced violence based on its context. So I think it's not simply about poverty, as important as poverty is in this conversation. It also has to do with the capacity of the state itself.
Right, Professor Abbas, let me come to you, right there in our Abuja studio. What are your thoughts about, what he just said? About the social structure. Is it just about that, the social structure, or, what else is missing and the gaps that we need to close?
Well, thank you very much, Yoke. I'm pretty pleased that last speaker made certain references. Some of the points I raised earlier on, number one, in terms of focusing too much on whether we have enough intelligence and we don't have enough intelligence. And the fact that when you focus heavily on things like that, then you over-securitize the discussion itself, the discourse, which is going to then mirror the kind of response that you are going to have as a state actor, as a state government, as a federal government. And that is what we've had so far. So I don't think it's just a question of poverty, as you have said. There are so many other things. Part of the problem, I think I've said that over and over on this program, different contexts, however, is that we ghettoize problems in Nigeria. What do I mean by ghettoization? Something that's happening in the Northwest is a Northwest problem. So the treatment often focuses on the Northwest. If it is Northeast, we focus on Northeast and we disengage the rest of the country from it until something crawls up in another part of the country. We keep forgetting that these things is just, it has a very dynamic link. So if it is happening in Northwest today, it could come down to Southwest tomorrow. So a proper response would be for us, and that is, I think, what we are missing, is for us to be more holistic and to be more pragmatic in our approach to say, look, in sane societies, you have philosophers in government, you have thinkers in government. People can sit and take a hard look and say, if we've been dealing with terrorism in Nigeria for the past 15, 20 years, and we are not any wiser today, what will be the prognosis? Where are we likely to be in the next 10, 15 years? Let's project. What are the root causes? What led us to where we are? We're not even dealing with that at all. What we are dealing with is symptoms. It's like you have a headache. You go to a doctor. He hasn't examined you. He simply tells you, oh, you must have malaria because you have a headache. So let me give you a tablet or whatsoever. We all swallow the tablet. Even we self-medicate at home. Those who suffer malaria, you have malaria, you just go to a pharmacist and you get medication, you swallow it. We need first of all to understand what is the nature of parasite, and the parasite, whatever is giving that malaria in Mr. A might be different from what is in Mr. B. So if you give them the same medication, it's not going to, it will work in one, it won't work in the other person at the end of the day. So we need to take a step back and first and foremost be very, very holistic in the way we approach terrorism. So when we focus too much on issue of poverty, we're not the only poor countries but there are poorer countries in the world that are doing fantastically much better than us as a country. So don't let us, I mean, sometimes we try to exceptionalize ourselves. And exceptionalism has its own problem on so many levels. Somebody will tell you something cannot, if they say something cannot work in Nigeria, and I ask a question, why can't it work in Nigeria? Or Nigeria said, no, we are not a country living in Pluto, we live on the planet Earth. So we are not exceptional. We can't exceptionalize ourselves. It means we have to be original, we have to be deep thinking, and we have to be very, very resourceful in identifying the root causes of our problem. By saying that, I'm not saying simply go to the book and say, oh, it's poverty, it's lack of education, it's unemployment, and this and that. All those things are too, they're ready-made things that we run to. And I think we do that when we have become very, very lazy in analysis.
Right.
You know, and we have a lot of lazy. As an example, I mean, I think you referred to it earlier on. In Nigeria today, as soon as that information came out that yesterday that we were fourth ranking, everybody was going gung-ho. And I say, hang on, it's not the first time we were fourth. We've been fourth for about five years. Go back to between 2020 and 2020. In fact, we've been coming back to second before. We were number 2 at a point in time. 2016, 2015, we were number 3 at a point in time. Why do you have so much problem? Another problem is sometimes also over-politicization of these issues.
Yeah.
You know, when the result came out yesterday, I listened to a few things. Blames were being heaped on a particular government. And I keep on saying, look, where is bipartisanism in Nigeria, for goodness sake? We have a national crisis. We have a bubonic problem on our hand. Why don't we focus on this as Nigerians and not start casting aspersions that, oh, when Jonathan was there, this and that? It doesn't make any sense at all. And
right.
all these normally feature in the kind of approach we are going to have when we want to solve the problems.
Yeah, right.
And I said, terrorism is domestic, also it's global. Everything happening to us has global implication. Guess what? What is happening in Iran today is going to feed directly into the global GTI of 2027. Don't forget, Iran is going to activate necessarily all the sleeping cells it has across the world. Look at what is going on. We don't even talk about border problem as an example. 45% of terrorist activities happen at the borderline. Look at Colombia and Venezuela. Look at Afghanistan and Pakistan. Because border areas are ungoverned areas which has a lot of, authority gaps. That is where you have if you look at the report, most of the activities that happened, the terrorist activities that happened in 2025, 45% of them happen within 50 kilometers of borderlines of most countries.
Right.
And 64% within 100 kilometers of borderline. We're not even thinking about that. How do we make sure that that kind of proliferation is not going to happen? So we have to be much more thoughtful in our approach. We have to be much more holistic in our approach. We have to be much more deliberate in the way we want to tackle terrorism.
Right.
Not just going to cheap things like, terrorism, poverty, intelligence, and all this.
Right. Thank you for that. Let me come to you, Colonel. These conversations are easy, so to speak. You retired as a colonel, in the army. How easy is it really to be able to take all these things that we're talking about and, actually utilize it? Like, oh, it's a social structure issue. We shouldn't just be thinking about getting more arms or getting the military involved all the time, kinetic, non-kinetic. How easy is it to put all these things we're having in these conversations that this is what should be happening? I mean, when you were right there, was it that simple? Or is it that simple to just, say this is what we should be doing and let's just get to it?
Well, thank you very much, Joker. Times are evolving. I mean, things that happened when I was in the military, say, over maybe, over a decade ago, and what is happening now, a lot of changes have come in. Changes not only even within the military or with me or my relationship with the military, to say, but even within the nation. Nigeria is growing, and look at our population. Nigeria is like another mini world on its own. And before I continue to address this question, I'd like to, with all due respect, disagree with our respected Professor Abbas, saying that poverty will tend to continue to say poverty. To be very honest with you, we must not behave like the ostrich. One of our greatest problems in this country is poverty. And what strictly follows that is lack of education. And with poverty, lack of education, you know, you become a pound. And these people are exploiting. Look at what is happening. The system in the north there, where an able-bodied man wakes up from his house, leaves his own family, and goes to sit down at the doorstep of somebody, and then whatever that person gives him, that is what he takes home to pass to his family, rather than, you know, being independent. And that is where some indoctrination, some ideologies are pumped in. And that is a very, very serious one. Now, let's put that aside. What we are saying here is, even with the military involvement, it is not as if there are no early warning signs when these terrorists strike. But sometimes it's either these warnings are not properly analyzed, or they are not well communicated, or that even when they are communicated, they are not well disseminated across the agencies who are to take action. If what we're talking about is, you know, the military might and all, we won't be where we are today.
Does that still not point to poor intelligence gathering, low dissemination, lack of proper communication?
Absolutely, absolutely. And when it comes to intelligence, intelligence is not meant for the military alone. Intelligence cuts across. There must be education, awareness, and the citizens must have a buy-in. We must address the questions of governance. Are the people, do they feel safe? Do they feel recognized? Are they happy? If they are not getting what they are expected to get, the basic things they are expected to get, of course, people will feed off that gap, that poverty. We've had instances where it was reported that the terrorists, you know, they come, they give some communities, they give them handouts, and then they secure their allegiance, and they even report the movement of troops to them. So these are very, very troubling conditions that has to be addressed.
Okay, let me come to you quickly, Dr. Abdul. You know, we're talking about leadership, talking about people, talking about GTI and the rest. Dr. Abdul, to quote what, or rather reference what Colonel Dari said earlier, at the heart of it is people. We're talking about people. And the cultural, I don't know if you call it cultural, you may want to advise as well, the issue that Colonel Dari also raised about some people leaving their homes to go sit down somewhere. Well, there are those who would also know that that kind of thing happens in various ways all over the country, where some people just get up from their homes and just go and sit somewhere. But one way or the other, these things have a way of playing out in the entire ecosystem. At the end of it all is people. I've heard references this morning on this program, in this discussion, to the porosity of our borders. I've also heard a lot of conversation about poor intelligence and all of that. There are people in the local governments. There are people in the border communities. And we can't fight these wars, these battles, without involving the people, talking or rather thinking that we can only address it by only talking to security personnel and all of that. I think there might be a shortfall there. What are your thoughts in how we have engaged the people of Nigeria, particularly those that are directly involved or concerned about these matters down through the ages? Dr. Abdul.
You know, what I try to draw out on this matter, even from the beginning, is to understand the multidimensional character of the problem we are dealing with. That there is no one single source, and that there are multiple processes and conditions that shapes this. And many times, security conversations have been left to a very specialized body. Either you are a security analyst who come on television to discuss, to advocate for certain action, or you are a military officer or military establishment or the police establishment or the intelligence establishment, whether it's DSS or on other. And there's a limited attempt. There are two dimensions of the people's side, that's the citizen side. One is, look, to what extent are citizens themselves being involved in the process? The second dimension is, how are citizens themselves understanding and explaining this phenomenon? And both dimensions are important. That there is that important recognition, that connecting line between the action we take as a state or state institutions and how the people that are impacted by those actions accept it or react to such actions. Also, people remain very key. But also one thing to note is that the violent element also emerge from these people. But it is not everyone in the community that is perpetrating this violence. But the social condition of the people in everywhere and the kind of social relationship that has been established can shape how people, whether people commit crime or they don't commit crime, violent crime or even non-violent crime. And that's very important. These are established matters. And I'll give you a very quick example. Look, when the Northeast crisis started, a lot of us were involved in studies. And I remember how people were explaining the Northeast. Yes, we did talk about the situation in the Lake Chad, the deepening poverty, the collapse in education and social services, the governance crisis in the Northeast. The Northeast, if you remember very well, was actually one of the most excluded sub-region or zones of this country. People hardly go to Maiduguri or Taraba or Adamawa. It is so removed from Nigerian political and social structure, as it were. So those explanations were there. And then it was like, it can happen in the Northwest. Oh, because Northwest has proper structure, there is a deeper traditional institution, it is more included, they have... And a lot of us were saying, you are not understanding this thing really well. So when the banditry started in the Northwest, and for those of us involved in it, this banditry started in the Northwest way back around 2011, 2012. And we are so much shocked that people think banditry started in 2016 or 17, because some of us have been documenting it even earlier. But what happened? Largely by ethnically Fulani, without profiling anybody, but largely by ethnically Fulani. And if anybody knows the Fulop, particularly the pastoral communities of the Fulop, they are one of the most removed, less engaging, less state impact on their life, most exploited. It's a Fulop man who will hang his radio in the village and riding on a bicycle, and the police will stop him and say, where is the receipt of your radio? He has a torchlight. They say, where is the receipt of your torchlight? He doesn't like anything to do with authority. He runs away. He can spend money. Look, his cattle enter the farm, eat up the farm produce. The traditional ruler there, they carry 2, 3, 4 of the cattle, they sell it, they share the money. And before you know it, the social relationship became corroded, massively corroded, to an extent that the economic and the political, local economic and political system could create a form of a rebellion and establish the kind of condition we have today. And this also has mixed with ecology. Cattle were dying. Desertification was encroaching. So if you pick one issue, you're not going to have the right answer. And in that region, you have multiple forest reserves. These forest reserves were designed by, some of them designed by colonial authorities in terms of controlling demography. They didn't want massive, that kind of scattered settlement of people because they want to collect tax.
Right.
They also want to monitor people. And therefore, they mapped out areas and insisted you can't settle there, you can't farm there, you can't fish there. And they call it a forest reserve for ecological reason. That was the rationalization at that time.
Wow.
But it does have political meaning. And those reserves are scattered across the country. One of the biggest ones, one of them is the Sambisa Forest. The next one today is the Borgu Game Reserve. And that today, it cuts across Kwara, Niger, and Kebbi State. And you are seeing massively what is happening.
Right.
So if
Thank
you
you
talk, it is not the Niger, Kwara dimension, it is not your northwest.
Right.
It is not your typical places where people migrate out during dry season, we call it Tirani. But it's a highly luscious green area. So these are problems that we need to understand.
Apologies. I'm sure if we give you time, you'll go on and on being in it and, you know, doing so much work around these issues. But we must thank you for your time and coming to talk about this, as we do thank Professor Ademola Abbas, Director of Administration, the Progressive Institute, and Professor of International Law, Global Affairs. Both of you joined us from our Abuja studios. Thank you so much for coming. And we also thank Colonel Yomida, retired MD CEO of International Master Security Systems Limited. Thank you.
I thought
so
we were
much.
going to have a last word.
We've run out of time, really. We really run out of time. But,
Okay.
you know, you contributed so much.
Yeah, but the truth be told, military alone cannot win this war.
We
I think
understand
you all, the three of you are agreed on that.
You cannot bomb an ideology.
You three
Yeah.
are agreed on that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we'll be right back in just a moment. Ramadan is over.
Yes.
Fasting is over,
I don't
for, at
wanna
least for
say-
the Muslim community.
I don't want to say what the Yorubas say about that thing.
We'll be
Well,
right back
I'll tell our guests
to talk
when
about
before we
that.
start the conversation.
Very catchy song. Found myself dancing.
You know what's interesting?
What?
The Lent and Ramadan
Yeah,
happen at the same time this year.
just different lengths of time.
Just different lengths, but started about the same time,
Yeah, about the
right?
same
So
time,
the
yeah.
Christians and the Muslims were fasting at the same
the
time
same
in the
time.
country. That song was done by a Christian and a Muslim.
And
So you see that
there's fusion.
there's huge. But anyway, today we are talking about the end of Ramadan. And it marks the transition from a month of fasting, reflection, and self-discipline to a time of gratitude and community. It begins the Islamic month of Shawwal, which is the 10th month of the Islamic lunar calendar. Now, I had a conversation with another Muslim cleric yesterday on our sister program. And I was saying to him, look, the challenge is not the season. The challenge is sustaining the spiritual momentum
Yeah.
that
yeah.
has started. He told me some very, very interesting things that I'm going to ask our guests this morning. Sheikh Faisal Zuglul is an Islamic scholar, a member of the governing council of Daru Dawa Arabic College. It is a chartered accountant and a chartered economist. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I really don't know how you wear all those caps. Thank you for coming.
Well, he's wearing one now.
Yes. Well, Jubril Saba is also with us. He's Chief Imam, Muslim Workers Jamaat from Lagos Island. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Let me begin with you, Sheikh. This might sound a little interesting,
Okay.
so forgive me. Why does it seem like during Ramadan, a good number of people are very well behaved? They don't do some things. If you can see that the person to my left is laughing. They don't do some things. But the moment the fasting time ends, it seems like we are back to, they just press reset. Why is that? Or is that just an assumption?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
It is not an assumption. It is just, I would say it's just the human nature. Ramadan is just like taking a patient into the hospital for a period of time to get well and go back to normal activity. The same patient who possibly, when he's in the hospital, he stops taking alcohol, he stops taking to the doctor's directives. Immediately he leaves the hospital. There is every likelihood that he might still go back.
He will still go back to the hospital.
So
and possibly,
I think
God
it
forbid,
is just
die.
a normal human trait, which I think this is where you now have scholars. They need to keep emphasizing the need to keep that momentum till even after Ramadan. Because Ramadan is just a period where you are expected to go and mop up the energy for you to be able to use throughout the 11 months. It's not actually about that 1 month.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me come to you, Imam. What this Muslim cleric also told me yesterday is that in the month of Ramadan,
Yes,
the devil was chained.
indeed.
And that after Ramadan, he's released. First of all, is that true? Secondly, if that is the case, why weren't we supposed to learn some skills of how to keep him at bay when he is eventually released again after the month, so that we can sustain the spiritual momentum for a bit longer?
Indeed. Thank you. And yes, Shaitan is chained in Ramadan. And one way to look at it is, like my dear brother, the Sheikh, said, those 30 days or 29 days are a period of spiritual reset. So everything in the environment that could pull you back is suppressed, including Shaitan. And you practice what is called voluntary restraint. That when you learn how to hold yourself back from what is permissible for you, from dawn till dusk, when you come out of it, you should be able to understand that you can also practice restraint in the face of what is not permissible for you. So it's a training, it's a habit-forming period of 30 days that is meant to help you slow down, step back from the everyday hustle and distractions, and see that you're actually more than your appetites. That perhaps you might attain a God consciousness that helps you to see that this is also possible outside of Ramadan. And that's the work of the scholars, to constantly remind us, outside of the Ramadan, of the lessons we learned then when we forsake food, water, intimacy, for the sake of Allah, that if you can forsake those, then you can forsake all the other vices and the baser impulses of being human.
I'll stick with you for a second. Shouldn't we remind ourselves, Imam Asaba, that whatever it is that we are holding ourselves back from is more to our benefit than to God's? That, holding yourself back, exercising the restraint that you talked about, is more to our advantage. There has hardly been a conversation we had on this program that we haven't been told that our health is a function of what we eat and what we drink and certain other lifestyle habits that we put up. Isn't there a way that we can perhaps let people know these things so that when they start it, and it didn't kill them in 1 month, it won't kill them the rest of their lives?
Yeah, correct. And that's why it has to be a constant refrain. Every Friday on the mimbar, when the Imam gives his lectures, when he gives his khutbah, at every exhortation, whenever we get a chance to gather, we must remind ourselves, because we're creatures that forget. When we have very little comfort, we forget about the difficulties that we've passed through and begin again to behave in ways that are not befitting of our creation, right? So it's a duty upon the scholars, the people who guide us, to constantly remind us. But then Ramadan is also a period of reflection, because it slows you down to think, to reflect on yourself, the impact you're having on society. Because outside of Ramadan, those deep lessons from gathering together as community to break fast, the charity, the generosity, the voluntary restraint, like we said, to keep away from what is permissible, all of that should strengthen you to carry you through the rest of the year until you come to the next Ramadan.
To receive more energy. Just one, Sheikh, how do you feel as a scholar when you have to repeat the same thing over and over again? How does it more, how do you, that's why I said I really don't envy you.
Okay.
How does it feel?
It feels pleasant, because that's actually the job.
To continue to remind people?
When we look at the Quran will say that فَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah will say that remind the believers. He didn't say remind those who have not. Those who have believed totally, they have succumbed to Allah, they understand. The Quran said remind them, because it's just, as much as we are believers, we're Muslims, we are human. And it is just a common trait in human to tend to forget, to tend to lose himself. So, but then, as long as you are, it is now the role of the scholars to constantly put them back on track, such that they do not derail.
Right. It's a good thing that, when we say there's a particular month, set aside to reflect, to deprive yourself of worldly pleasures, and, pleasure meaning food and drink and things that will give you satisfaction. But, in reminding believers of, to reflect of the lessons learned during Ramadan and to keep that up for the other 11 months. I don't know, as is practiced in Christianity, sometimes we just call for fasting, from time to time to be able to. Does that happen as part of this, reminders, during the year? Are there still time set aside for, maybe 1 or 2 days to also fast from worldly pleasures and also deprive? Does that happen in the Islamic calendar?
It does happen, and that's a brilliant question. Actually, in the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, in this month of Shawwal, we're encouraged to fast for 6 days, because the tradition of Shawwal is twofold. It's continuation of what you were doing in Ramadan, and it's also celebration. So it's not just about the celebration of the Eid, the Thanksgiving, the visiting each other. It is also 6 days in Shawwal following the fast in Ramadan. It is said and reported by the Prophet ﷺ that it equates to the reward of fasting for a full year. So again, it's a way of remaining connected to the things that you used to do in Ramadan, the Quran you recited, the restraint you showed, the standing for prayer in the night, even if it's for a shorter period, the charity. You're also encouraged, as part of the tradition of the Prophet, to fast on Mondays and Thursdays. So the religion is structured in a way that it keeps bringing you back to what helps you connect to what is real, to what helps you build discipline and not deprivation, because that restraint is meant to help build discipline. It's like a marathon runner. You go into a focused period of practice to be able to run an actual race on marathon day, and closer to the day of the marathon, maybe you run shorter races, less intense practices. It's the same with the religion.
Okay, still talking about this fasting, and sincerely, it's a good habit, healthy habit. It's just that, there are some people, once they are on medication, you really can't fast, like that. But still talking about the festival, let me come to you, Sheikh. We understand that the Prophet taught that fasting is a shield against bad behavior. So, how can scholars like you better use the Friday khutbahs after Ramadan to instill that spiritual intolerance for public corruption and bribery and other bad behaviors?
Okay. Yes, because that is even actually the essence of this activity, Ramadan, and other things in Islam. So, but I think it's not even about not enough encouraging scholars, but it is their responsibility, and it is what they need to do from time to time, because there is a direct connection between Islam and nation building. If we are practicing Islam and the impact is not felt in the nation, then I think we are not doing enough. So if we go into Ramadan, that is you are expected to come out accountability, because that's the period where you could go into the corner of your room, you could eat, but you do not. You could drink, but you do not. You understand? So it means the same thing is what you expected to take into your practical life as a public office holder, for instance. You are there in the corner of your office where nobody sees you. Then you should know that Allah is watching you, and you would not take even a penny of the public fund entrusted in your care.
So the way you are saying that you can go into the corner of your room, but you don't. Someone is feeling guilty right now. That's exactly what it is.
That's what I did.
Someone is feeling guilty right now that I went into the corner to take a sip of one thing or the other. Imam Jabbar, I'm sorry to make this comparison, but it is instructive. Saudi Arabia is a largely Islamic country. The UAE is a largely Islamic country. And we see what their leaders do for their people. And Mecca wouldn't be the place where everyone gathers if the country had been run down. So it is well organized. And our people go from all over the world, Nigerians inclusive, from wherever they are in the world, go to Mecca and a number of other places like that, and they see all these wonderful things that some might argue is because they imbibe some of these habits and attitudes of Islam and use it to build their nation. Is there a way we can foster that as well, beyond just the whole talk that we have? Is there a way to say, okay, so long as you belong in this religion, you are duty bound to do certain things, and we shouldn't be hearing some untoward things from you? Is there a way that can be done?
Indeed, it's possible. It's down to how we connect the rigors of religious rituals to character reformation. So I'll give an example. The one who holds himself back from drinking water at 2 p.m. in the month of Ramadan, for the sake of Allah, should be able to restrain himself from helping himself to the public purse. We need to connect it in people's hearts to the point where they understand that your religion and the way you practice your religion is not separate from your work, whether as a politician or somebody in the private sector or an entrepreneur. It's an expression of your faith, right? So if with every permissible act that we perform, we begin to understand that so long as you do it for the sake of Allah and for the benefit of all of creation, it is an act of worship. It connects in people's minds, right?
And I think you should say that again.
If we begin to understand, right, that for every permissible act that you perform, so long as you do it purely for the sake of Allah, like we do fasting in Ramadan, and for the benefit of all of creation, it is an act of worship. That is the ultimate expression of your faith. That is the true definition of integrity and excellence. The teacher who teaches children excellently, right, patiently, is worshiping Allah. The engineer who builds a road that is not destroyed after the first rains is worshiping Allah. The procurement person, the budget people who are not padding budgets, who are not circumventing procurement processes, purely for the sake of Allah, that I know he's watching me, and I know he would ask me about this, he's worshipping Allah. The public leader who has a trust and a manner and understands that in serving people, he will be called to question, to account for his service, is worshipping Allah. And this is what will reform behavior, that constant reminder and that constant refrain in their minds. There is a very short story I would like to share. Umar ibn Khattab, because he took us to the Middle East, the second caliph of Islam, radiallahu anhu, he, I think, is the gold standard for governance in public office. He was the caliph of Islam, the leader of the Muslims, sitting in Medina. It was reported that he was so concerned about his position as a leader that he would say that he worries that if a mule, a donkey, stumbled on the road in Iraq, which is thousands of miles away, Allah will hold him to account for not paving that road. That was the level to which the consciousness of Allah was alive in the hearts of those leaders then. And we can reawaken it in ours by connecting their work, their amal, what they do on a day-to-day basis, to worship.
I'd like you to expatiate a little further on that. Thank you so much, Imam Asaba, for saying that. I'd like you to expatiate a little further on Sheikh Zugo, because we understand that the love of one's homeland has a way of intersecting with the universal goals of Ramadan. Help us see it from a theological perspective and perhaps, ape some of the things that he has also said.
I think it is indeed, it is very, very important. Not only important, it is, I will continue to emphasize responsibility. When, in fact, it amazes me when today we come into a country like Nigeria and we still find the depth of poverty. In fact, and Islam exists there. It shouldn't. How do I mean? Islam, in the Quran, says that anywhere you have Muslims, there must not be poverty. So if you are in a country, in a place where...
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I am sorry.
Okay.
You said that the Quran says anywhere a Muslim exists,
Yeah.
there must not be poverty.
Yes.
So when you see northern Nigeria, you heard the first conversation we were having with our guests. They were talking about this whole insurgency being a function of poverty. And we know that, the north is largely Muslim. What does that suggest?
The Quran says that when you pull up the zakat, it is to take the poor out of poverty. That is a big terms of reference for our leaders. Now, if that happens in the north or in some parts of the country, it just tells us a simple thing. The leaders are not doing what they're expected to do. But I will always say that I think it's high time we start looking at other areas that can support the government. And I think we'll come back into the mosque, we go into the church. If we are still trying to cope with the epidemic of poverty in Nigeria, and you see Christians paying tithe, and you see the church building schools, hospitals that even the worshippers in those churches cannot attend, then I think we know where to turn into. If we have the Muslim community organizations building schools that an average member cannot attend, because it is now we now come to how it should be. It's a simple thing. Mop up the zakat, collect the zakat from people, from Muslims who can pay, and use it to alleviate, in fact, to eradicate poverty for the poor ones. We can just, so if we still now have a situation where, most especially in the northern part of this country, where you will see that as much as you have so much, rich Muslims, and we still have so much level of poverty, and it means we need to go back into the mosque. And it's a simple thing we should do. Where are the zakat? It's a simple thing. We bring them together. At least on a general note, let's build schools. Let's build hospitals. Let's, strategically remove this, people from, from poverty. And I think if the mosque can do that, the church does that. If we add that to what the government will do, I think a lot will have been done.
Right. Yeah. I mean, be that as may. So, you play a very significant role in, education. Because of the role you play as chief imam. How can the mosque, which is supposed to be a hub of educating people, especially during the month of Ramadan, and I'm sure there are other programs that happen from time to time during the year. There people come around. There are lectures. I know lectures happen. It's a very popular thing that happens all the time. So how can we use that as not just to talk, but to truly educate the people such that they imbibe these things that he just spoke about? That is not just, to educate them enough to say, this is what needs to be done. Don't just, talk to people that they must do, imbibe this, imbibe that, be spiritual, deny yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. It's not only that, but to be able to educate them, this is what must be done. This is what the Quran preaches. This is what Islam is about. It's about community. It's about helping each other, such that we do not have such situation as the insecurity that we have, the killings and the attacks, or to look at your neighbor as, I just don't like you, so I'm going to harm you, or something like that.
Indeed. No, thank you very much, Joke. And when they said sunrise is really hard hitting, the questions are really tough questions. I think I kind of underestimated that, because this last line of questioning is actually an indictment on people like myself. And I've heard it said before that some people say they are glad that they studied Islam before they met Muslims. Yeah. And the fact that you have Muslims in a community and some of these societal ills still exist suggests that our practice of the deen falls below the standard. The mosque, for instance, is the beating heart of the community. In every community where you have a mosque, the sunnah, the way it was taught to us from the time of the Prophet, the mosque in Medina was where he received delegations. It was a court. It was where disputes were settled. It was a place of learning. It was where people who needed help came to and they found succor. And we have to return to that. It's not where we are. If I look at our own masjid at Obalende, that's not where we are. We need to create a space where adults can come to for education, not just about theology, financial literacy, civic duty, health awareness. That space has to be created for that. Conflict mediation within the community before it escalates. That should be the first place people should go to. If people within a community are saying, let's go to the elders of this mosque, let's go to the imam of this mosque to help us quell this issue, then the mosque is serving its duty. For the young people and interfaith, make it a platform where people can come to and learn about voter, your responsibilities as a voter, run health drives, run skill building programs. That's what the mosque is for. It's not just for ritual prayer. And it's an area where a lot of us fall short. Ramadan, the congregation and the number of people you see coming into the mosque daily in Ramadan, either at the break of fast time or for the nightly prayers, tells you that people are yearning for something. It's on us to create that opportunity to fully utilize that space to, educate our people and hopefully reform them.
Part two of that question is centers on the youth. I know that as at the young age, from very young, from 2-3 years old, the children are taught, you know, the Quran, they're taught the language, Arabic, how to speak it and all that. And, you know, the recitals are really, truly inspiring sometimes when you hear them speak. But, you know, can we also teach the youth these things that you have, you know, spoken about right from a young age to say this is the right way to go? That's because we are old now. You know, you may think that, you know, but if we start letting them know, and I know that those things happen, but as you have said, maybe it could be expanded to, you know, really drive it down and say, no, this is how to go. This is what Islam teaches, and this is how the way you should go.
No, thanks, Joke. And again, it's about connection.
Yeah.
It's how do we connect the message to make it relevant for people across social strata, economic strata, and age. For the young person, the self-restraint, the discipline, the patience of Ramadan should help you understand that if you did not cheat on eating during the day in Ramadan, then you shouldn't cheat in your exams. And you shouldn't cheat very broadly in life generally. The patience, the endurance that you practiced should also help you power through a difficult semester in school.
Yeah.
Because the lesson there is that all hardship ends. You come to a point where there is ease, you know. Part of what we should connect for the young people of this generation and other generations is also to understand that the discipline that saw you through Ramadan is what helps you to develop excellence in your profession.
Yeah.
You know, remaining, following a structure, sticking to it, and trusting that it all works out in the end. That you go through 29, 30 days of discipline, some restraint, and then there's joy on the day of Eid. Like delayed gratification, voluntary restraint, delayed gratification in an environment that promotes overconsumption and instant gratification. Once you pick those lessons and connect it to their everyday lives, it should come alive in their hearts.
Wow.
Well, Sheikh, your last words on this, particularly, again, to children, because we often say that children are the leaders of tomorrow, but we don't even teach them leadership. So how can they lead? So how do you think we can pass on the lessons we have talked about today to the children, particularly starting from the family?
I think it's just to continue to show them, because most of the time we emphasize just informing the children what to do and all that, and we fail to do the right thing. So the major thing, the first thing is just, number one, we need to start doing the right thing. By the time we start doing the right thing, I think consciously or unconsciously, the children would see that and follow that poster. However, in addition to that, I think we would now continue to engage in all those areas, in schools, in the mosques, in the church. Let's, continue, and possibly even having leadership centers that actually teach children about leadership. It's not just because most of the people we have today, I would say they are accidental leaders. So I think if we can start that system of actually building, nurturing children to be leaders, I think that would be a great impact.
Thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts. Sheikh Faisal Zuglu, Islamic scholar, member of Governing Council of Darul Dawa Arabic College, is also a chartered accountant and chartered economist. Again, I still don't know how you cope with those. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
As well as Jubril Saba, who is Chief Imam, Muslim Workers, Jamaat, Lagos Island. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
For your humble
Pleasure.
thoughts. Now, when we return, we want to tell you about forests. No, I'm not talking about your bush, but find out when we return.
Ayo, which international day will we have? You should have International Day of Joke.
I was going to say International Day of Joy.
Joke. Joke.
No, the International Day of Joke.
No.
But no, we're not talking about that for now. We're talking about International Day of Forests. That's what we're talking about today, so please take us to it.
All Right, so the International Day of the Forest and selected theme for 2026 is forest and economics. How can this impact our economies? Emphasizing that forests mean business. This theme highlights the critical role forests play in driving sustainable economic prosperity and sustaining global livelihoods. Forests support over 1.6 billion people for their livelihoods and employ millions in sectors like conservation, research, ecotourism. Sustainable forest products also serve as nature-based alternatives to carbon-intensive materials, opening new economic opportunities, and so on and so forth. We can go on and on and on.
You really don't know about this matter, do you? So let the experts speak.
I know enough. Why? Right, so we have Dr. Joseph Onoja, Director General, Nigerian Conservation Foundation. He's here in the studio with us. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
To my left, I have Dr. Eugene Itwa, CEO, Natural Eco Capital. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Happy International Day of Forests.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed.
You didn't wish him the same.
Sorry?
You didn't wish him the same. Happy International Day.
They are together.
So both of us, so, and everybody actually.
Maybe we should begin, Dr. Noja, by asking how conscious you think the Nigerian population in particular is about forests. Because once we have forests, most of the time, unfortunately, is not for the very good reasons. Forests is where bandits hide. It's where lions and all those life-threatening activities are conjured in the mind. Mm-hmm. Forests are synonymous with horror films. No, like that. So maybe we should begin with that, helping us to understand what forests are for us, what they do for us, and what appreciation we should be giving.
So thank you very much for having me and for having us and to discuss this very important topic about forests. And as you rightly pointed out, there is a misconception which shouldn't be because of probably Hollywood and because of the reality we are facing in Nigeria. When you talk about Sambisa Forest and all of those places, what comes to mind? Because it's one of my mentors that actually established that forest, the person of Hall. It was one who established that forest in the 1970s when he came in as an expatriate biologist living in Maiduguri. And the last time I was with him last week, he was still recalling those with nostalgia when he was establishing those forests and how he used to go around the forest. And also, I who studied in Yankari Game Reserve and how we used to go around all of those places and all of that. So I could feel what he was feeling. So coming to your question about how people perceive forests these days, which shouldn't be, because forests are the lungs of the earth. And without the forest, without the ecosystem, without the habitat, we as humans cannot thrive. Unfortunately, is being used for what is not supposed to be used about, especially in Nigeria, where we have insurgency and people hiding there to commit all sorts of crimes. But they play very, very important role for our well-being. Because without our forest, apart from humans, even businesses will not be able to thrive. And that's the reality. So as humans, we cannot be apart from our forest. We are part of it. And that is what sustains life. So when we look at forests as our lifeline to our continuous living here on earth, then we will be able to appreciate it despite and in spite of all of the challenges that we are having.
Dr. Ito, I'm not sure that most industrialists were in the class when this was being taught in life. Or maybe they left the WhatsApp group. Or maybe they didn't just get the memo, because we continue to face significant deforestation and ecosystem loss. When you hear development, what we know as development is deforestation in some ways. pull down the trees, let the buildings come up. You know, so I'm now hearing terms like industrial forests, or something like that, where the tall skyscrapers have taken the place of tall trees and all those
concrete
things.
jungle, you mean?
Thank you, that's the word I'm looking for. Concrete jungle. So what are the key drivers of this, and why should this concern not just environmentalists but businesses as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. And you've just given a beautiful description. Concrete jungles. When we talk about drivers of deforestation, we're simply saying what are those things that we do to remove the forest, simply put. And you just talked about development. Infrastructure is one key driver. Urban development is another one. What about firewood use and then illegal logging? And if I come back to firewood use, we want to recognize that for us as a nation, if you talk about household energy use, a number of us depend on fuel use, or wood. And so where do we get the wood? From the forest. And so in other words, if there is no electricity from the grid, what it implies is that we will take our axe and go into the forest and chop down the trees. That is one of the key drivers today. And so if you also look at the impact that is coming from it, he just talked about, the beauty and the like. Let's talk about the collapse of the grid, for instance. If you look at the dams, the Shiroro, Jeba, and the like, what actually support them to ensuring that we have optimal supply of energy from them is the trees you have all around them. Yeah. When you pull them down from the catchment, what you are simply doing is to tell us we do not need that optimal supply from those hydro dams. And so you have all of that. For business, it's not just, so in other words, if we now look at it, chopping down the trees, and then looking at the drivers, you're also saying that energy security is in question for us. We have a challenge with that. What about water security? It's also a challenge because I just talked about the dam. Sedimentation of those dams coming to it. Even flood control is also another challenge. The function will not be there. For businesses, it simply means that what they are dependent on is also suffering. There are two things here. The business depends on the environment. So in other words, there are impacts from them as well. What is it that the business takes from the environment? In taking, what do they also do to impact on the environment? So dependencies and impacts is what we see. For instance, if we talk about the impact, if you look at it, the pollution we see all around us today, it's from industrial processes, in most cases. If you look at waste generation, and so on and so forth, all of those things are impacts arising.
There's a bit of a disconnect, Dr. Itua, from the importance of forests and what we call development. We need to find a way to make that connect. Because this whole idea of, maybe I should bring it to you, this whole idea of deforestation has always been, I mean, even in the Americas, when America was growing into the world power it is today, they also had their own fair share of such challenges. So we need to get that balance.
Yeah.
Right. So what would be your recommendation in that
regard? And that is why, from research, because we need evidence-based approach, there are areas we call sensitive areas. You talk about areas like wetlands. You talk about areas like watershed areas. You talk about areas like sensitive areas that, for instance, if you have an area that is susceptible to landslide and so on, these are areas that have been carved out to be protected And that is why you have protected areas, where you have some animals who are also living in that habitat that are also playing what we call the ecosystem service that they provide for us. An ecosystem service are the services that nature provides for us, which we depend on and which we enjoy.
But we don't know that
We don't know that. And that is where, from the picture he painted, you see, people did not connect deforestation with the collapse in national grid. Because what happens is that when you deforest, you leave the land bare. And when you leave the land bare, when it rains, there is a lot of runoff and erosion. And all of this topsoil that is being washed off goes into the stream. And when that happens, there's sediment, and then it stops the water from flowing as it should. So it starts all the way, so there won't be enough water from the different tributaries that goes into the dam, and then there's reduction of water, and then there is not much water for it to be able to power the hydro dams. So we are not averse to development, but that development must be done in sensitive ways. When you see a forest is not just a place that is waiting to be cleared for development, but we must be able to look at them and segment them, which areas are to be cleared, which areas are to be developed. I'll give a classical example of the Lekki axis. There is, before the Lekki Conservation Center, there is an intersection now, it used to be a roundabout, called the Igbo Efon. And Igbo Efon means forest of buffaloes. Instead of buffaloes now, instead of trees, we have concrete. Now, what has happened is that the ecosystem service that those places are supposed to be providing are all gone. So the Lekki Conservation Center, we are receiving much, much water than we should have received ordinarily, because every other place has been sand-filled. So imagine that the cubic of water that we are receiving in that center, we also sand-filled that center. Where would that water go to? That means that place will be unlivable, even with the flooding that we already have. So all the water coming all the way from Agungi ends up in that place. So that is why I'm saying that there are some areas that we shouldn't develop. We should allow the forest to play its role. And you see, these animals that we have, they play their own role in the environment as nature has placed them there. Because there are some things that even if we have the money, we will not be able to produce as effective. And the common one is oxygen. Imagine that the trees around us are all high level, high efficient oxygen plants. Plants as in manufacturing plants. But they do it quietly and so effectively. So imagine you have that kind of machinery running on diesel. Imagine the noise. Imagine the uncomfortability that you'll be feeling while they are producing their oxygen. But plants do it so quietly and so efficient. But we remove those things and then replace them with our inefficient machines, and then we are also paying for it. What nature will have done it for us free. So that is why, to answer your question directly, we are not averse to development, but development must be done with nature in mind so that we don't end up developing as wise fools.
Interesting. I think they should be inviting you for every energy summit.
Right. So, but, education also plays an important part, Dr. Itwa. He has said a lot, and this thing comes from because he works in this area, he has researched in this area, he knows right from wrong. Of course, we have advertorials and campaigns every now and then telling, especially in rural areas, telling the people why they should not use firewood because it's bad for their health. It causes cancer, lung cancer, and, what have you. And then, we're asked to switch to cleaner energy, not necessarily gas, but there's a way it can be used that the energy will be clean. So what do the people do really? But there's just a small percentage of people that can do that. So what should people do for use as, energy in the terms of cooking, especially in rural areas, such that they will not resort to firewood all the time and, causing this depletion that we have? And then the second part of that question is, even when we talk about development, we talk about even the rural areas. When you're building your homes, you use wood, don't you, to prop up a lot of things. So apart from cooking and all that, wood is used essentially in a lot of things. So how do we get around this?
Well, to get around it, first and foremost, maybe we'll look at it from the policy angle. What do we have as an alternative to fuel use? We already know we have, for instance, gas. Yeah. But do we actually have we been able to distribute this gas to everywhere? In nooks and crannies of the country? I'm not too sure. But even if within the city we are seeing collapse of the national grid, what happens at the rural area? Will they get this electricity as well? I'm not too sure there. And so, in other words, their core alternative to any other source of supply is still the fuel wood. But interestingly, there have been different organizations coming up with different mechanisms or technologies, like clean cooking stoves. Mm. So you have those kind of stove that people have actually brought about that will use just small chips of wood. You know, the sawmill, for instance, those chips, they can easily. And then some are turning them to briquettes. Okay. And so they cannot, those are alternatives that could be used by at the rural areas. Even now, I have even noticed that even within the cities, people are beginning to go into that rather than get firewood, because they know, you talk about the health aspect of it, they know that it's cleaner for the lungs, for the environment, and in fact, for the pocket as well, because it's also pocket friendly. And so you have that as an alternative. But the way we are also looking at it is that business can do better. Because when business do not actually, we talk about development, and business develop. An organization, for instance, a manufacturing organization, that, let's say a brewery, that relies on water. If that organization decides to pollute the water that it relies on because of development, there are challenges, whether it's in the rural area or otherwise. So in other words, the business must deliberately ensure that the business model is developing in a manner that watershed, wherever it is that they get water from, is protected heavily. Otherwise, they in turn will suffer for it as well. But we must, like you said, co-develop with the environment. We must. Otherwise, we will continue to have the ripple effect we see all around us in terms of the health impacts on the economy itself, and so on and so forth. So in other words, business must begin to deliberately design their models in a manner that take all of this into consideration.
So how do we do that, Dr. Onoja? I think I've heard about China, and I think also somewhere in North Africa, where they are building large solar fields. And I think some other parts of Nigeria are also considering such large solar fields. And large solar fields mean no trees, no forests, unless we want to say it's a forest of solar plains and all of that. Yeah. So perhaps, again, I come back to that balance. For success to be tangible for us as a country, all these efforts we must find a way to pull them together. So is there a more structured effort to bring business into the conversation of conservation?
Yes. So, I mean, working very closely with the Natural Eco Capital and other partners, Business for Nature and so on, we're trying to, we've established what we call the Business Advisory Group, where we are trying to co-develop with the businesses what we call the Business Action Plan, where businesses will be able to have a say, just like you mentioned. It's in the overall business strategy interest of businesses for them to look at nature as part of their raw materials, because if you are depleting your raw material, that means as a business you are not sustainable. So you need to think about it. So coming to your question about how we'll be able to make this happen, and that's why I am of the school of thought that we should always think of the end from the beginning. Just like we are running away from fossil fuels, we also need to think about this new solution that we are bringing. You talked about solar panels, because they are not just going to be on air. They are going to necessarily be on land somewhere. I need to somehow clear the land. So what are these lands that we're going to be using? Are we going to start deforesting sensitive areas for us to be able to have these alternative energies or so on? And that's where we need to sit down and have research and evidence-based approach to all of this, because we have to look at probably degraded lands. We have to look at areas that can be used without necessarily tampering with sensitive areas. But all of these things needs to have all the interplay of all the stakeholders involved in that, so that businesses themselves, they will not end up shooting themselves on the leg by trying to just develop, just looking at one-way traffic without looking at the other implications of it. So what I'm trying to say is that all of us needs to come together to sit down on the right table and say, okay, this is the way we want to go, but what are the impacts that we're going to avoid? What are the mitigation measures that we're going to put in place, so that whatever developmental measures that we are taking doesn't eventually have a negative impact on us down the line?
I want to challenge you, Dr. Onoja, because I'm a big disciple of communication, so to speak. There's a way we have to begin to let people know the implications of not giving the due attention we should to nature. We are thinking now as a nation about a malaria-free country. But does malaria-free mean mosquito-free? Doesn't that also underscore the fact that maybe the malaria is what we want to get rid of, not the so-called malaria vector, none of that. So, again, I say, I think there is a need to challenge you to say, look, how are we communicating these issues to our people?
Yeah, so, I mean, that is why a day like this exists, so that we'll be able to talk about it.
This is once a year.
Yeah, this is once a year. So that's what I said, that is why a day like this. So it's a continuous thing. So we have an International Day of Forests, we have World Wildlife Day, we have World Wetlands Day, we have World Environment Day, we have different days. And then apart from that, there are structured programs that we, not just us, but other partners as well in the field, are trying to communicate with us. And yes, I agree with you that probably we need to also look at more innovative ways to get people involved in it. But one thing is that for people to really get involved in, they need to see what is the need for them. They need to see that connection. And that's why we are trying to create that connection, so that people will know that we are not apart from nature. We are part of it. Because whatever we spend, when we destroy nature, we spend much more to be able to replace the services that nature provides. For instance, if we destroy the forest, we're exposing ourselves as humans to some of the pathogens that we may not be immune to, that we'll be exposed to. Those pathogens were already locked up in the forest with these animals. But once we clear the forest, we'll start exposing ourselves to them. The snakes that are supposed to necessarily be in the forest will start coming to our homes to come and hunt the rodents that they were supposed to be hunting in the forest. But because we've destroyed them, they come to us. So these are some of these little things that we need to see, these connections that we have. So that's why I'm saying that we are not apart from nature, we are part of it. And if we destroy the ecosystem that supports us, our life support system, that's what I'm saying that we may be developing as wise fools.
Interesting. Well, Dr. Etua, as we mark International Day of Forests, sounds like Obujo then Obujo in my ears. What practical steps do you think we should be considering, particularly for businesses and stakeholders? What should they begin to do today to support a more sustainable and nature-positive future?
Thank you very much. And again, from what Dr. Noja has said, I think your question earlier, I think there's this phrase that is used now, a whole of society approach. What it implies that everyone must be part of it. And so we have decided to look at business. How can business integrate this as part of their overall decision making, as part of their business model? And so we're coming up with this business advisory group. Natural Capital, then the Nigeria Conservation Foundation, with Business for Nature, and then Capital's Coalition. And so the idea here is to support the businesses to understand what they need to do. There are critical things they need to do that they are not doing now. Interestingly, they need to first and foremost even understand the opportunities therein for them. Because businesses want to see the opportunities before they go into it. And looking at the size of even the opportunities therein, I was going through the World Economic Forum report that refers to this, and it says that annually till 2030, we have 10 trillion opportunity of investment that is available for businesses. So in other words, those businesses or the CEOs who look at these things from the angle of CSR or corporate social responsibility, they want to start rethinking their business model. In fact, even globally, we're told that by the Global Biodiversity Framework, for instance, help us to understand that annually, the investment opportunity that we have is about $200 billion US. Businesses, early starters, for instance, in Nigeria, will benefit from all of this. If they continue the manner they have done the business before now, business as usual, they will not have that opportunity. So in other words, they need to know what their dependencies on the environment is. An organization that takes from the environment, because there is degradation of its raw material, the source of raw material, for instance, like water, we'll not be looking at inflation. We'll be looking at source of raw materials. And so, if your business model is not right, you eventually run into that trouble.
Well, I think just as you and both of you have said earlier, a day like this is a reminder. Let's just hope that we're able to sustain these lessons, not just for now, but for our future. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here this morning. Dr. Eugene Itua is CEO, Natural Eco Capital, and as well as Dr. Joseph Onoja, Director General, Nigerian Conservation Foundation. We await more communication from you on this matter.
All right, thank you very much.
And we will not wait for the next international day.
Exactly, yeah. We'll continue to push.
We'll take another break, and when we return, we have our next conversation. Do stay with us.
Back to the program, and now we take you now to Asaba, all the way in Delta State, to have a conversation with the Asaba of Asaba in conversation with corporate Nigeria. Now, the Asaba of Asaba is the traditional ruler and paramount monarch of Asaba, the capital of Delta State. The current and 14th Asaba, His Royal Majesty will be Professor Epiphany Chibogu Azinge, will be in conversation with corporate Nigeria in a few days. And this is to bridge the gap between traditional leadership and the private sector to drive the economic transformation of Asaba. Now, the monarch, an erudite legal scholar and former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, has pivoted the throne towards a Renaissance leadership model focused on attract investment, boost youth productivity, and encourage private sector and private sector-led development. Now, our guest on the program to talk about this is Boniface Chizie. Great to see you. Long time. Can you hear me, Mr. Boniface Chizie?
Well, I'm hearing you, but you're breaking. You're breaking a bit, so I'm hearing you, yes.
Apologies for that. If you can hear me clearly, talk us through the strategic goal of the conversation the Asaba will have with corporate Nigeria.
Well, okay. Well, I think that, well, essentially, what has happened is that we have our monarch who is barely a year, slightly more than a year on the throne, has come with innovative ideas. He has come and introduced so many changes, set up so many committees, and the committees have, discovered so many ideas, so many project ideas, and then we are trying to, bring this, to sell this idea. So I think that there are two pranks, to this visit. Our monarch is somebody who wants to do things differently. He wants to blaze the trail. And so he called me and said to me, I would want to meet with corporate Nigeria. And so he wants to come and meet with corporate Nigeria. I don't know when last you saw a monarch, traditional ruler, making that sort of move. So I think that this typifies, Professor Epifani Azinge, the 14th Asaba of Asaba. So he wants to do things differently. He wants to think outside the box, and he wants to be impactful. And in fact, I must tell you, he's really been impactful. In the 1 year he's been on the saddle, on the throne, he's done lots of innovative things. Now, those of us who have known him for quite some time, we had our expectations. But I must tell you for a fact that he has come and exceeded those expectations by a wide margin. So he's done things that if I want to enumerate here, I will not leave here. But I expect that during the conversation, when I give my opening remarks, I'll be able to say a bit more than I'm saying now. He's done lots of things. And so part of it is he wants to move to corporate Nigeria. We have projects and ideas. He set up committees, and some of these committees have gone to work, and they've come with lots of ideas. He wants his domain, to be improved upon. He wants to concentrate on the welfare of our citizens, and he's doing exactly that. For instance, he made me the head of the Blue Economic Committee, and we came up with lots of projects. Things are happening in Asaba in terms of we have the beach estate project is going on and so on. We stuff like that, for instance, the port in Asaba, could be deepened, so that we can begin to have, large cargo ships, anchor in Asaba. It's not economic for businessmen down the southeast, down the south, to often go to Lagos, base in Lagos and move their cargoes, at high cost and at high risk from Lagos, down south. So that possibility is there. We want attract tourist attraction. We have water. We want to have hydro energy. We know the problems we have in this country with electricity. Renewable energy is very important. We want to attract tourism. Asaba is a prime tourist destination. So all this is happening. So that's exactly why we want to come and discuss with corporate Nigerians, those who would have the capacity and who have the potential, to be able to come and invest in Asaba.
And how are you balancing the traditional, the prestige of being a traditional ruler of the Asaba's throne with the corporate professionalism required to pitch, to CEOs and international development partners to actually achieve this development agenda that he is setting out to do?
Well, I have some difficulties with getting what you're trying to say. Are you saying that you might have some? Yes.
No, I said, if you can hear me clearly, let me repeat myself. I'll just make myself a bit louder. The balancing act between the prestige of being a traditional ruler and, pitching his development ideas to CEOs and those that will help to actualize this dream.
Some difficulties. Well, if what you're saying is whether, in fact, as a traditional ruler, you should be doing that. I think that he's doing quite a lot on his own. For instance, if you go to Asaba and see what he has done in terms of welfare, you see what he has done in terms of the schools. He's gone to schools and he's taking infrastructure to school. He's taking desks and chairs to schools. He has taken books to schools. He's gone to hospitals. We don't have hospitals, within the Asaba environment. He's gone there and he's trying to equip them. They are trying to arrange for medical personnel, to attend to them and so on. He's done quite a bit. So I don't think that he's going to be handicapped. And of course, he has a very good relationship with the state government. I would expect that whatever initiative he comes up with, we'll be getting the blessing of the state governor. But of course, for us, we'll cross that bridge, when we get there.
I find it interesting because the question on my mind, the next question on my mind was the state governments, because some of the wonderful initiatives in the mind of the Asaba of Asaba, there are those who would say those are the responsibilities of any state government. So to come out and take those roles will look like some kind of crossing certain lines. So if you can give us an idea of how that syncs the role of traditional ruler with that of local government administration in the state, or rather in that particular environment, and that of the state government. Please help us get an understanding so people know that this is what we call the a responsibility of the whole, sort of, a whole of society project, and not just something that is being done in pockets.
Well, okay, I think that our monarch is trying to act as a catalyst. You are right in saying that it has to be all hands on deck. So he wants to act as a catalyst. I talked about his good relationship with the governor. That makes some very strong statement. And then if he comes with project ideas, I said earlier on, that's the next bridge. So let's do this. Even what we're coming to Lagos to do is talk to the private sector. So we're not really government, and so we're going to talk to private sector. The corporate Nigeria, and those who operate in that space. For them to come and invest in Asaba. If they come to Asaba and they want to invest and they have issues with, for instance, getting land and so on and so forth, making sure that things are facilitated, making sure that they get approvals, our monarch is able to swing that. So we're not going to ask the state government. We're not looking for, in some respects, it's possible that you have a public sector partnership. That's a possibility. But then we are looking for private sector investors. So we'll come with ideas, and we expect that the investors in themselves, they are not for the Christmases. They are going to come and then do their own feasibility studies, and they find that it's profitable, and they're coming to invest. What our monarch is going to do in this respect is not going to look for money to put in that business, but he's going to give them some promises, give them some assurances, and be there to stand in the breach, in case there are issues, some disputes and so on and so forth. That he doesn't need anybody's approval, to do. So he's not going to look for money, to invest. But what he's going to do is to use his personality, use his goodwill, use his standing. He has a very good standing to attract investments to Asaba. That's what he wants to do. But he's not going to invest, and probably not going to ask the state government to put money there. So that's not the point.
Right.
So,
what are the key things that he's looking to address, those developmental issues that he wants to take care of in Asaba?
The issues that I talked about the blue economy, where I played. I mean, there are lots of things in Asaba. Asaba is a state, being a state capital. In fact, the fourth largest Delta State is the fourth largest state in Nigeria. So it's a big area, and we have lots of endowments. So we have gas. Almost 40% of the gas supply is in Asaba, and so there are all sorts of facilities. So there are things to use. There are assets, available there, that we can leverage on, to bring investments. So I think that's exactly the way to go. I did say earlier on that he's not going to he's not thinking of, he doesn't have the money to put there to invest. That's not his place to invest. But he wants to act as a catalyst. He wants to be a pivot around which, things will begin to happen. And so he talks to private sector people, and then if he's able to convince them, to have, during this session, we're going to have an interactive education where they will ask the monarch a question, and he's going to, I'm sure, give a good account to himself, the way he responds to those questions. And so we're going to do that. And our expectation is that, at the end of the day, we'll get some of them, being sufficiently convinced, to come and invest. But also, we mustn't forget the other plank of this mission. The plank is that our monarch wants to be seen to blazen the trail. He wants to be doing something which I've not seen done in this environment. Maybe it's happened before, but but I have not seen it. So he wants to come and have this conversation, and it goes on record that probably he's the first monarch, to be doing this. And so for us, this is also very important. So there are two sides to it. He wants to do something different. He wants to think outside the box, and then then we will hope that with sort of projects package we have, we just finished an investment summit in Asaba where we looked through all this, and a whole gamut, and we have people who have been on this space for some time. They are going to come and make expert presentations, And we expect that, by the time we finish, some people will be sold on some of these ideas, and then they'll come and invest. But for us, that's the next step after this meeting, this conversation.
Okay, so talk us through the event of this conversation. You say it's May 29th. Talk us through the what's to expect
program?
at the event. Yes.
Yes, well, we expect that people will come, that there'll be arrivals. We expect that, we'll be there. Then Monarch would have royal entry, and then we'll have salutations, the traditional salutations. And then he's going to bless, he's going to bless all of us and cause the blessings of the Lord to come upon the environment as we do that. And then I would have to give my welcoming address as the chairman of the planning committee. And then after that, we are going to have presentations, that will cover the whole gamut, including the environment, all manner of projects will be projected, for people to, come and invest. And then after that, we'll have interlude, bring down the tension in the environment. We'll have entertainment. We have maybe some traditional dancers. We have a sax person that we know is an expert in that area. He's going to give us some sax music, and then we'll go for dinner. So there's a buffet dinner, and then after the dinner, and then we'll have the interactive session. Well, at that time, we're all relaxed. The temperature is down, and then we expect that the corporate Nigeria will be up in arms, trying to find out what is on offer. So what incentives, they can get by coming to Asaba. And I'm sure Monarch is more than able, is more than prepared, to do this. And then after that, we'll begin to wind down. We'll have votes of chance, and then we'll begin to depart.
Right. Sorry. What are the sponsorship categories?
What?
The sponsorship categories.
Sponsorships. We're looking for we have corporate sponsors. So we have individual sponsors. We have people who would sponsor tables at the event. That's exactly what it is. And then the corporate sponsors, it goes from 10 million to 5 million. We've not gotten much of that anyway. But so we have sponsors. And then we have the brochure for the day. We'll have space for people to advertise their product and pay some money. From 1.5 million. 1.5 million, 2 million, and it goes on that way. So that's exactly what it is. So, and we expect that those who are going to be the sponsors will have their logo on display, and of course the event itself is going to be streamed live. So I know for sure that channels, John Momo has promised me, he's going to send a crew from channels, to be at the event, and we know that a crew is also coming from Arise Television. So we'd expect that. It's going to stream live, so people are going to be watching this. And so there's so much scope for people to, to again sell their products, sell themselves, and sell their businesses. So I think that we look forward to a bumper evening. That's what it is. Yes.
Yeah, I assume from some of the things that you said earlier that the hope is that after this event, some public-private partnership initiatives will be activated. I want you to please take us through the specific frameworks, the PPP frameworks that are being designed to address, some of the chronic issues in Asaba, like flood management, network deterioration, and all sorts like that.
Well, we are trying to do this. I must tell you that not all the issues have been taken on board. We would expect that people would come, and once they have an interest, if you're an investor, you do your study, and then there'll still be some aspects of risk. But you take your risk, you'll be risk adverse. You take your risk in a very, calculated manner. So you look at it, and then, like I said before, acquiring land. You want to acquire land in a place to do an investment. You can have some issues about gaining title, to the land. So this is where a monarch can come. So if there are disputes, he uses a high office, to ensure that those disputes are amicably resolved, so that all substance, so people are looking for, even if you're looking for people to employ, it's going to be able to, get the community behind him to make sure that we get the best employees. So I think that's we're not able to say that, that upfront, that all the challenges are going to be taken on board, but life is about meeting challenges and then taking them on. And so as we go on, there are challenges, but as long as, you have insurance, that at the end of the day, you'll be able to get through those challenges. I think that's what's most important for most businessmen. If you don't want to take any risk, then you don't even invest at all.
Right. I'm sure you're going to have a very, very interesting time at that event, and we wish you all the best, and we wish the Asaba of Asaba all the best, as well as he has conversation with corporate Nigeria to bring about that much desired development in Asaba. He is a traditional ruler, and I'm sure he believes he owes the community a responsibility to see development during his lifetime as the traditional ruler of the area. And I'm sure the people will also love him for it and cherish his time on the throne for that. Boniface Chize, it's been wonderful having that conversation with you. And I wish you all the best during that time and all the success that you need. And I wish you a successful event, really, really. Well done.
Thank you very much. We are counting on channels also to be there, so we say thank you for what you've done.
All right.
But let's not from you, like Oliver Twist, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
thing your name is not Oliver Twist. But our next conversation is, of course, a home run, but it is family related because there are some things that we evolve. We start these conversations and we're wondering, how come we're not able to sustain it? And the ones we sustain, how come they're able to sustain it? Your children are in class and they're relating with other children, and you're wondering, hey, child, where'd you get this attitude from? I didn't teach you this one. Where's it coming from? That and more when we return for our lifestyle segment. Okay, thank you for staying with us. Yes, I know that Joke has something to say about this. Oh, but because she woke up quite early this morning.
Yes.
Earlier than normal.
To do what?
You want us to spill the beans in public?
There's no beans. There's no beans. It's still about, it's subject to this conversation that we're going to, building family values. Do you know why I woke up very early this morning? I should say it.
Yes,
I should say it.
It will be coming from your mouth.
Yes, my precious daughter was going for a spelling bee. Is right now at a spelling bee competition, all the way in Lekki.
Imagine, they are spelling bees.
So we had to get them to school.
Wait a minute, yeah, just to be clear. You live around here. And their own is a 2-hour journey.
So we had to get her to school early, wake up early, get her ready, get her to school so that they can go for their spelling bee. Family value, family. Family value.
Well, there is family values.
Yes.
Okay, and there is family culture.
Education, well, it's part of it.
Yes. So, building a family culture is about intentionality, about shaping the shared way the family lives, relates, makes meaning, do's and don'ts.
Yes, creating boundaries.
In my house, for instance, that it is not just forbidden, it is anathema for you to lie. No. It is. Anyway, let's get into the conversation. Amina Yunus Ali joins us this morning. She's a certified family coach. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me again.
This conversation is especially more about you today as a family and particularly as a Muslim, because you had to get the children to fast. Did you?
Oh, yes. I have one daughter, and she's 8. And
what did you tell that poor girl?
She fasted 26 out of 30.
Oh, that's
Jesus.
good. That's good.
How do you pull that off?
So we started training her when she was 6, thereabout. So she'll fast till midday,
Okay.
And then last year she fasted 19 out of 30. And she would fast sometimes midday, sometimes 2, sometimes 4. But this year, so I asked her, okay, so now you're used to it, so tell me, what is your goal? And she says, well, can I do 20 this year? I said, well, 20 is good. But part of the things that we like to do in this family is that we like to stretch ourselves to improve on what we've done before. And she said, okay, I'll do 25. But then she ended up doing 26. And when she realized it, she was like, I cannot believe I did that. I can't believe I did that. Mommy, 26. I said, yes. They're like, oh, wow. But it was hard, though.
And that's, I think, that's what
Yes,
that's what the conversation is about. How do we build that culture into the children in the family so that they can also take it further?
One of the things that I like to share with my clients is to consistently have conversation. If you know something is important to you. So, when we were talking earlier, you said your own culture is that no one must. They can't dare it. But you see, before you got to that daring, they attempted. They will try. They will test you. They will push your buttons. But if you continue to insist that this we do not do, and you give them the information about what the instruction is, what the consequences are, and what the reward is. Because sometimes I think as parents, we stop at 2 things, the first 2, the instruction and the consequence, right? But we don't look at what the reward of goodness should be. And whether you're a Muslim or you're a Christian, there is always reward for doing good, right? So if a child breaks a plate, and they know in this house we never lie, and they willingly come and tell you that they broke a plate, and your antenna is still high, is just as high as if you had discovered that they broke that plate, then it is like, what's the point? I might as well continue to lie. But if your first reaction is, thank you so much for telling me the truth, I am still angry that this happened, but I'll come back to it. It gives them the understanding that, okay, yes, this is why we say the truth, because whatever anathema that would have happened post the experience, Daddy will still listen. Daddy will still be patient enough to understand why what happened. But if your reaction is just as the same as when they told you or when they didn't tell you and you discovered yourself, then what's the point? So reward has to be part of the culture. In my own family, for instance, the fact that she fasted 26, she had a special reward. That she fasted at all, she had a reward for it, And then we now discussed, because we were debriefing yesterday after the prayers, and I was telling her what was the hardest part. She said the hardest part was looking at her friends not fasting.
Yeah.
As in, how can they be looking at me knowing that I'm fasting and be drinking water in my presence?
Yeah.
So now
the only water that is making her.
But it was hot, as in this month was particularly hot. So I think for her it was the fact that I'm thirsty and I couldn't even go for a drink. And there were days she'll come to me and say, Mommy, can I have a drink? I mean, it's just a sip. In my own time, we would have gone, taken the drink, and say, Mommy, we forgot.
That's the end of that.
So, that's the thing. I think for me, it's the conversation that is the most important foundation in building that culture.
Joker has tons of questions, but maybe I should just run through my list first. Sometimes the challenge is the person who is saying let's start a family culture needs to have cultures.
Yeah.
For me, madam, I don't know how to lie. Because if I lie to you today and you ask me about it tomorrow, I will forget my previous lie. And lie is like building a house. You have to put one block
on top of the other to cover it up.
I will forget my lie. So that gives the responsibility. The person that wants to start a culture must be one that people they themselves don't compromise on certain values in the culture. So how do we get children to live in a way different from the way we live if the children have seen us do things that we don't want them to do? You don't want them to beat their spouses, you don't want them to fight, you don't want them to lie, you don't want them to cheat, yet occasionally you have justification for doing it all by yourself, even if you're not doing it in front of the children.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's a very valid point. You cannot teach what you do not do. It is pretty difficult because so another thing with family culture is it has to pass the test of why. Why do we do it in the first place? So if you are not lying, then you have to like, but you know, my friend, she said this, and I know it's a lie because I was there. Okay, in our family, we don't do this because when it is important for you to tell the truth, it becomes difficult for us to trust you that you are telling the truth. And then the why would be the continuous conversation. The reason most children struggle with the cultures that exist, apart from the fact that, you know, they also see their parents doing something different to what that has been said, it's also because if it is unpopular, how do I remain a part of the existing social premise out there? How do I belong? Or, you know, like would like to say there's a difference between fitting in and belonging. How do I fit in first? Because a 9-year-old is not thinking about belonging in terms of, oh, I have values and I have cultures. It is just that nobody is bullying me. It is that nobody is looking at me weirdly, you know. So it is something that, okay, it is acceptable, not just in my family, but also in the society out there. So for the parent, it is, number one, can you do as you say without breaking? If I'm, for instance, say, we don't beat in this house, or we don't beat each other. So you're telling siblings not to beat each other, but you're the same person that will beat the older sibling for something the younger sibling does, or you just beat any of the children, and it becomes like, we don't beat in this house, so 2-legged animals are better than 4-legged animals, or what does that mean? Because it does have to pass the test of why. You cannot just say, oh, in this house we are respectful. Respectful how? Is it that, so my daughter questions me sometimes and says, Mommy, you say we should, when she's asking like a gazillion of questions, because she's more extroverted than I am, and I'm done talking for the day with my clients and I just want peace and quiet, and she's saying, Mommy, why? And I'm like, okay, why has a long thing and 2 branches? And she says something like, Mommy, but you know that was rude.
Hey, I'm sure in your mind you would have gone back. Can I tell this to my mommy or my daddy?
I mean, that was rude. And I'm thinking, okay, she's probably said it to somebody and I was there and I said, okay, what you said was rude. And I'm thinking of the way to justify it, that I said that's why. But it is the truth. It was rude. I mean, if I can't allow her to say it to somebody else, why should I be the exception in that role? So your culture has to pass the why answer, and it also has to be something that you are willing to do. A lot of parents are not willing to reparent themselves, but then they want to produce or raise the perfect children, the most respectable children, the kind-hearted children. But if you yourself are struggling with it, then you have to know that certain things, certain values, no matter how beautiful they sound, if you are not convinced enough to practice them yourself, it is going to be very difficult for that child not to go out there and do the same.
So, but how do our individual strengths and passion contribute to family values or family culture? You know that when the children are growing up, you start teaching them those values from the beginning. This is how we do, this is what we don't do, or you just, incorporate things that you do together as a family to create memories. But along the way, everyone is created differently. In inculcating these values and traditions into children, they also have a mind of their own sometimes of how they want to interpret some things and all that. So how do you
Navigate
balance,
it.
that act into realizing that this person, we've had this discussion before about teenagers and when they become to, try and find their own feet and all that. So how do we balance it, knowing that this child A has a mind of his own, child B has a mind of his own, but let's see how we can balance it and ensure that in inculcating the family value, you also know that this person has a mind of their own as well on how to interpret
a culture ceases to be a culture if it is not uniform. Right? So it has to be uniform. But you can only get that uniformity if I agree, he agrees, you agree as well, right? It can only work that way. But if it is an instruction that somebody has written somewhere and says this is our culture, and then it hasn't passed the why muster, it hasn't passed the conversation muster, it hasn't past the do muster, then what we just say is, okay, this is just an autocratic law somewhere. And then we'll have secrets. People will begin to keep secrets. But knowing that my personality is different from your personality and his personality, one of the things that families need to do is to have a family meeting. Because as children are growing, their exposure would often inform the things that they are likely to want more in their life. So I'll give an example. I cannot dance to save my life, and I cannot sing to save my life. But my daughter, oh God.
Nightingale.
Right? Now you begin to look at her and you're like, okay, and I don't like going out. I mean, just give me 24 hours in the day to be at home and I'm very cool with it. But she loves going out. She loves talking to strangers. I mean, we traveled the other day and she was making friends here and there and people are calling me on my phone and asking about my daughter and I'm like, who is this? Like, really? So you understand how social experiences is important to her. But for me, I had to learn that this is her own way. So what in our culture would support that her personality? So we included things like monthly outings and things like that. It is not sufficient if you ask her. But at least I have broken my own protocol of pretending that I am not an extrovert and I prefer my bed, to give her the space to blossom in that day. On the days that I'm unable to take her, her dad is unable to take her, then somebody in my family is going to be available for her to do that. Because this is important for her to flourish. What we fail to do as adults oftentimes is to think that just because we never had the opportunity when we were growing up and we turned out okay, means that, well, our children too, they'll be okay. When they grow up, they begin to figure out themselves. But some of these experiences, like how their personality dictates the things they want in the family. Maybe they want a family dinner together. And when you were growing up, somebody's eating in the bedroom, and that person is eating in the living room, and that person is sitting on the balcony. You'd never had that experience. You have to learn how to inculcate the peculiarities of each person into the family culture. So it feels like, yes, not only are they making sacrifices for us to be together as a family, but they are willing to allow me to flourish because this matters to me.
How about perhaps the conversation about this whole family values, the why should also extend to the objective, long-term objective. So, because I've said this a number of times that people get married without vision. And when people get married without vision, there is no restraint to what we can do or what we can't do. So how do we create, even if people got married without vision or without a mission statement, there is a need to come up with one, because one is coming from this side of life, the other is coming from that side of experience, and both of them decide to come together. They're going to produce a child. So how do we come up with such family mission statements that the children can co-own? No, not co-own, own by themselves.
By themselves, yeah.
So that they also take it on and it will become like kind of a family mantra.
The couple in that situation would have to have a long and hearty conversation about why they were together in the first place. Because really, and I like the fact that you brought that up, because we can't begin to shape a culture when we have different opinions of how that culture should look. So daddy is driven by being the next billionaire in his family heritage, and mom is driven by being the prayer warrior of the entire dynasty. So they have different ideas of how a family should look like, right? But that is just something that they for themselves have to decide that it matters. Like how do I bring my need for financial stability and her need for spiritual security together to make a family vision, and then now present it to the kids and say, okay, we want to create a family that allows, a generation that allows us in value, in culture, in the mission of why we exist. And we would like your help. Because that's one thing children like. They like to feel that they are important and you're not the one that is just dictating. They like to feel like they are germane to the existence of that family. What we see these days, and it's so sad, is where we have children asking parents like, did I ask you to bring me into this world? No. Right? And
I really don't want to be in your room when you're having those conversations, because I know that they're very, very difficult conversations.
Oh yeah, they are. But it stems from, I don't understand why I'm here. You go to work every day, I go to school every day. There is nothing binding us. There's no connection. So exactly why am I here? I'm just taking up space. Okay, so I might as well take up space in the way I like. That makes me comfortable. And that's where the YOLO idea comes, and you only live once. So let me just live my life.
What about the dictatorship family culture? That's
whatever daddy says.
The Abayo situation, where I was always first in my class. You must continue that family tradition.
I was in law. You must be in law. I was in medicine.
It is our family. My grandfather was a lawyer. My father is a lawyer. I'm a lawyer, so
If I want to be a lawyer, I can be a music lawyer.
Very possible. But you see, there has to be space for adaptation as well. So yeah, music lawyer works, but will daddy allow us to go do music for us to now become? So we have people who now say, okay, I'll go to school for you. I'll do my first degree for my parents, and then my second degree will be for me.
Yeah, depends on who's sponsoring that second degree though.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
But again, it speaks to, when we were growing up, there was this linear experience of how life should be. You go to school, you graduate, you get married, you have children. That was just it. And you start working and then you have children. That was the linear experience. We weren't given a blueprint of asking the meaningful conversations of, why do I even want to get married? We weren't given the opportunity to heal from the things that we saw between our parents that didn't make sense to us. You may see your parents fight, but you may not have seen them make up. You just know that the following day everybody is okay. So we never really understood what conflict meant and how conflict should be resolved.
Okay, this one last question, and I'd like you to give us a list, maybe just short stuff. To start the family culture conversation, what are the questions to ask? What are the issues to raise with the children?
And I think I've said this before here.
I understand the number one is conversation. So what should be in this conversation?
In this conversation will be, do you like me? Do you like being in this family? Because some children just believe that they're in that family because they don't have a choice. God just dropped us here for us to be there. But do you like being in this family? If you could change one thing in this family, what would that be? And if you could add one thing in that family, what would that look like? What are the things that you see us do that you truly admire? because there has to be. It cannot be all sour stories in that relationship. There has to be something that you've noticed about. I know I'm not the best parent, but give me something that you admire.
Give me some credit.
Yeah, give me some credit. And that really shifts the conversation from looking at what is wrong to what is missing and how I can add to what is missing.
I think this is part one of this conversation.
Yeah.
Honestly. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
It's been a pleasure.
I hope you have taken notes.
Yeah.
Yes, if you haven't taken notes, don't worry, we'll put this one on YouTube for you to. Amina Yunus Ali is a certified family life coach. We've been talking about how to build a family culture. Once again, thank you so much for your time today.
A pleasure.
That's the show today. Thank you for the privilege of being a part of your Saturday morning. I'm Ayo Makinde.
And I'm
Enjoy
Joke
the rest
Rogers.
of your weekend.
Bye.